On today's show, Sean Davis joins to discuss what we learned and didn't learn from JJ Redick and Rob Pelinka at Media Day, as well as training camp battles, the fifth starter, the backup center spot, the seventh man, all that and more. Let's get into it.
Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another episode. On today's show, I'm thrilled to be joined by Sean Davis. It has been a minute. How you doing, man?
Good. New kind of makeshift background
New
for
setup?
right now, but yeah, I'll get mine to yours eventually.
If you need some purple lights, let me know. I got the hookup.
Yeah, it's been a minute. I almost had to like readjust to hearing the Buha part, and then the yo-yo was a little bit longer this time. I'm starting to pick up on
I'm hyped, man. Basketball is back. The season has officially started, unofficially, with part one of Media Day today. JJ Redick and Rob Pelinka addressed the media a few hours ago. I went live for about an hour and a half talking through some of the updates and non-updates that we got. But I think we have to start with the biggest news of the day, which is JJ Redick's extension that Rob Pelinka just casually unveiled during his opening monologue, just right at the end. You know, we recently extended JJ, and so we have a rookie head coach who had never coached above the youth level, coaches this team to number 3 seed, 51 season, and they lose unceremoniously in round one. Very disappointing loss to Minnesota in 5 games. But I think JJ, a lot more positive than negative coming off of his rookie season. But he was already signed to a multi-year deal. So to extend on top of that, you'd have to think this presumably puts him on the same timeline as Rob Pelinka, who was extended earlier in the year. So what was your reaction when you saw the news that JJ was extended? And do you agree with that? Like, what was your thought process with it?
Well, you bring it up really quickly. The Lakers exit in the playoffs reminded me that was my last appearance. We both horrifically predicted. I think I went Lakers in 5, and I had it flipped. Just not the result.
I think I had a clip. I think because we were ranking the potential opponents for the Lakers, and I think I had a clip in there that somehow no one has clipped, thankfully. But I was Thank God. Yeah, the Wolves are like a nice puppy that you're not afraid of the Wolves, and
what a nice puppy that is.
They made me
there.
eat my they ate my hand off.
Yeah. So the JJ thing is interesting. The JJ thing really is just interesting. I think that it's interesting, not necessarily because he didn't necessarily deserve it. It's just early. That's why it's interesting. It's just like you normally don't see something like this, but Rob and Jeannie or Walter, crew, whatever you want to call it at this point, are obviously really, really high on JJ. And that's the one thing I do recall being kind of in front of when JJ was hired is, look, I don't know what this is going to look like in year one. And I think the ending wasn't great, and that's because of some of the stuff they did, and where left the roster at. And in hindsight, that Minnesota matchup was probably a bad one with the benefit of hindsight. But take the exit aside. If you told any Laker fan that their season would have ended with 50 wins in year one of JJ Redick, I would have taken that as a massive plus. And I remember saying at the beginning when he got hired that I think it's only going to get better after year one, simply because of JJ's track record, and I believe the fact that he is a worker or a grinder, as Rob Pelinka loves to bring up. So I think it's just more so them committing to that and committing to the fact that, like, we know this dude's work ethic and care is ridiculous, to where it's almost, I don't want to say he has no choice but to succeed, or like there isn't a pathway else but success for JJ. But like, because there is obviously a way where it could fail, but like that's kind of what I think it is, honestly. It's like, look, his work ethic is so ridiculous, his care and his want to be great is so ridiculous that it just has to work. I think there's a level of that kind of plays in it here too, and that's why I was like confident on the long-term vision for JJ, and why I thought when JJ was going through the interviewing process, I was like, man, the Charlotte job looks real great right in that moment. he obviously lands the Lakers job, and it was a level of excitement, but it was more so long term. And I also think it's them aligning JJ long term with Luka and making sure that partnering is fit, and you're not that partnering is secure, locked in. You're not really trying to mess up that from a Lakers perspective. And there are some things that we can talk negative about following year one from JJ. But all this stuff that I think you would typically be super, super worried about with a year one head coach, I think we're honestly positives for JJ. My biggest criticism of JJ year one were, offensive play calling and not having a curveball or not having like a changeup pitch defensively. Like he had his fastball, and the Timberwolves, picked up on it and, kept hitting home runs, and they just didn't really have another pitch to go to consistently defensively. But the communication, some of the other stuff that would typically fall under year one, like organizational problems, that was pretty much, I think, secure to solidify from JJ after year one. The other stuff can always improve and get better at. So I think it's a commitment to that. Sorry for the long ramble, but I do believe that they believe in JJ, and I like JJ long term.
I really like that you mentioned the Luka part of this, because I was thinking more about the Rob part of this and those two as the basketball leaders of the organization, at least in terms of like boots on the ground. You have the head of basketball operations, the president of basketball operations and GM and Rob, and then you have the head coach setting the tone and establishing the culture in JJ. And having those two guys locked up for the foreseeable future is, I think, huge, just in terms of you don't have a lame duck situation at any point here over the next few years. And then you also have Luka now locked up for multiple years and theoretically going to opt out once he's eligible to, and then sign that super max and be getting paid like $1 million per game and be the highest paid player in the league. So I think the Lakers are now set up here for like a 5 to 7 year window with the trio of JJ, Rob, and Luka. And one thing that JJ shared that now I feel comfortable talking a little bit more about, but I just think this speaks to his mentality and the self-reflection and perspective that he has, is right after exit interviews, he pulled the beat reporters aside and had like a heart-to-heart with us about going into battle. And it was a very like intense kind of expression on his end, but he referenced it today in the presser about needing to be better with the media in terms of like keeping his cool, and that it's hard for him to turn that off when he's in battle. He's engaged and he gets worked up, and then when he comes and talks to us and maybe someone asks the wrong question or the wrong implication, and then all of a sudden he can go off on them like he did ahead of Game 5, which was just objectively a really bad look for him, to then also them get their ass kicked in Game 5 and lose the series in 5. So I thought he owned up to that to us in a way that I felt was like, I've never had a coach pull me to the side and express not really like regret, but just like acknowledgement that he could at sometimes run hot and be a little bit too much. And just him having that self-reflection and perspective, I thought was telling at the time. And then he just referenced it. So I felt comfortable now kind of sharing that insight from him. But I think he's got a really good perspective and head on his shoulders in terms of like his own flaws and weaknesses. And that's oftentimes 90% of the battle with coaches is like, do they know what they need to be better at? Do they know what they are already good at? And like, I think JJ's got that perspective. I thought the other most interesting thing, like we've heard Rob say he wants LeBron to retire a Lakers. So like, that's not new news. Optionality is always the preferred buzzword from Rob. So that's another thing that like we've heard before in terms of roster building. But one of the things that like kind of flew under the radar, like there's several Rui questions and they sung Rui's praises, but then Rob was asked directly a question about Rui and the contract extension. Rui is contract extension eligible until October 20th, the day before the season starts. And he effectively, I'm paraphrasing here, said that when we're having ongoing discussions with someone with the contract situation, we don't want to talk about it publicly. So that could be something, that could be nothing. But if the Lakers are potentially holding talks with Rui Hachimura about a contract extension, if he does sign that, he is ineligible to be traded for 6 months, which would take him well past the February, I believe, 6th trade deadline. So on the Rui front, with a potential extension, how did that sit with you? And what do you think about the possibility of the Lakers taking one of their most valuable trade chips off the table at the same time that they're talking about optionality and going out, making a championship level move after 20 games and like this and that? They extend Rui, they can't trade him. So I think he's worthy of an extension. Like I think he's a pretty good player, but at the same time, like that does limit their optionality there. So I just thought it was interesting to hear Rob talk about it in that way and sort of hint at that. But what did you make of it?
Yeah, so the Rui, and I'm not going to spoil our conversation about the fifth starter later on, but I do think it's funny sometimes how Laker fans react to positive Rui Hachimura news, whether it's him starting, him getting a lot of minutes, their belief in Rui. And sometimes I don't think the fan base sees it, and sometimes I don't see it even. But the one thing that I'm always like come back to is like, dog, they love him. They absolutely adore Rui from an organization standpoint. And so that's why like the extension news or them at least having conversations about extending him don't surprise me. And didn't it was kind of a nothing burger for me, honestly. The only thing that I would take out of it is, okay, cool. Then stop like lying to us and saying, oh, optionality. Or, we want to make moves or whatever. You basically wanting to extend Rui, which I'm not even going to like discuss the decision or the thought process you wanting to do that. But you saying you're going to do that, you just limit your options and are basically saying we feel comfortable with this roster, which if that's the case, fine, cool beans. Like I think this seems kind of getting underrated because of how last season ended. Aiden doesn't necessarily have, all the best PR in the world, and some of that's on him. But like they're kind of underrated. So I think they're just better off just saying like, bro, we like this team. We're gonna like commit to this team and commit to Rui long term and build. And we like Rui as a long term chip next to Luka, next to Austin. Then saying, yeah, we really, really, really want to get a wing or go get Andrew Wiggins or have there be signals out there that they're interested in certain players, when in reality, like, okay, you're telling us to our face that we want to keep Rui, then this other stuff we just need to just stop caring about. You don't want to do that stuff. You're committed to this group, and that's kind of like my takeaway.
I also wonder, you just mentioned Wiggins, and like I feel like there's been this giant game of chicken going on between LA and Miami all offseason, and we had earlier in the offseason, there's trading things back and forth of LA's interested, but then the asking price is too high. Then Miami's not interested in trading him. Then don't feel like it goes anywhere. Then it's dormant for a couple months or so. And then a couple weeks ago, we got the report, after Luka extends and plays well at Eurobasket, the Lakers are interested in making a win now move and investing more in this roster. And then, by the way, Andrew Wiggins, now all of a sudden they're interested in him. And like now it's official. And we have a couple reports like that. And then you have Miami push back, I think a week and a half ago, and say that they're not interested in Wiggins. And that was before the Thiero injury. So I wonder how the Thiero injury potentially affects that, if at all. But then if you're thinking about it just from a chess standpoint here in terms of a negotiation, if you're the Lakers and you come out and say, well, we're considering extending Rui, and Rui is theoretically the primary trade chip, at least from a salary perspective, in a Wiggins deal, then that's putting even more pressure on Miami to, hey, if you want Rui and you want to get off the extra year of Wiggins and you think they're comparable players, or maybe even you think Rui's better, you better trade for him soon. Otherwise, we're going to extend him in the next month and then we can't trade him. So I wonder if there's like a psychological element at all with just this kind of dance that I think LA and Miami have been doing all summer. But that aside, I do agree with you that the Lakers, like people very high up in that organization, are really fond of Rui and think very highly of him. And I wonder, we're going to talk about the fifth starter, but I wonder how much that plays into that, if at all, and his contract status. But really, to me, like, until something happens, I guess I'm operating under the assumption that he's not going to sign the extension and that he's going to be a free agent next summer. But if something does happen, obviously he's on the roster through the deadline, and like that does change. Now it's Gabe, it's Maxi Kleber. I don't think you're able to flip Vando. You got Dalton, and then you got 1 pick, 1 second, and like a few swaps. and those swaps I don't think are that valuable just based on how the Lakers project out, especially at least like the more recent swaps or sooner ones. So we'll see. I just thought it was really interesting because that to me changes, like, that is really, to your point, like betting on this year's team or at least standing pat primarily, because I don't know what you're getting for Gabe, Maxi, Dalton, and like a second. Like I don't think you're getting much, to be completely honest.
Yeah. You remember the meme a couple years ago of like, hey, you can have Gabe Vincent. It's the SpongeBob like opens the clarinet case. It's like Gabe 2027 first. And that's always the offer. Yeah, that's kind of going to be what it is this year if they extend Rui.
And look, I mean, I guess theoretically with those three plus a first, you can get into a player in like the low to mid 20s, but that has to almost be a salary dump to some extent. Like you could theoretically get in the Wiggins ballpark, but it's I've been saying like the Lakers have this Venn diagram of like under 30, good two-way wing, team friendly contract, and somehow they're available for this poo-poo platter that we're offering. We'll see. But before we get into training camp battles, which is the thing I'm most excited to talk to you about today, I wanted to look at some of the things that JJ said, because I asked him directly about schematic changes and refinements and what he was thinking about with the new roster and with the new tools that he has at his disposal. He did not take the bait. He shot me down. He said, I will hopefully see during the preseason. So I will be monitoring it during the preseason. We'll see what JJ cooks up. But a few things that stood out to me just in terms of like throwaway comments. He mentioned sharing as a big thing with Luka, LeBron, and Austin in terms of that dynamic and those three needing to do a better job of, I think, sharing. He was talking about sharing the ball, sharing the spotlight, sharing leadership, all that stuff. So that was interesting. So that to me reads as more maybe like Luka off the ball and not as much heliocentrism. He mentioned utility, which is a football concept that he learned from Sean McVay about, and that was also in reference to those three of maybe certain plays or sets that incorporate all three of them and kind of are making sure everyone's touching the ball and being involved. He mentioned championship shape a billion times, which makes me wonder if they're going to try and play faster, or he kept harping on conditioning and shape. And then also some early offense stuff. What was talking about early offense concepts with his coaching staff, and then also some quick hitting reads to get DeAndre Ayton involved, similar to some of the things they would run with AD. So among those handful of things that were sort of passing by statements by JJ, what, if anything, stands out to you?
I think the biggest thing is in terms of like the sharing. I think that's kind of interesting. And you brought up, I want to specifically hit on your point where you talked about Luka being a little bit more off the ball. The one thing that I do think is kind of underrated about Luka, I think if you want to have a complaint about Luka, I think off the ball is when he does get it. There are moments where he is very maybe indecisive at times in terms of like once he catches and instead of just going or just making a decision, sometimes he can't just catch and hold and kind of reevaluate the situation. Like I think Tatum, for example, does this a lot too, where it's all right, Jaylen Brown, using that as the example, or in Dallas, even when it happened a lot, or Lakers, obviously now with LeBron and Austin. Okay, LeBron or Austin creates an advantage. Luka kick out. All right, let's catch and let's kind of like reset. Instead of like, no, catch and make that quicker reaction. I think Tatum's egregiously more worse than Luka. But I do think when Luka's had true spot up situations where he is off the ball, he has to make a decision and play off the catch. Like he was a 74th percentile spot up scorer last season in Dallas. Or sorry, the NBA Finals push in Dallas in the regular season and in the playoffs. Like a super effective spot up catch and shoot guy in Dallas regular season and playoffs. Shot 37% on catch and shoot threes. Not going to get the most volume ever. Like he took 213 catch and shoot threes throughout that entire season, which is just barely over 20% of his volume of threes throughout the season. And this season with the Lakers, maybe closer to a third. So, and he shot 38% from three regular season and playoffs off catch and shoot opportunity. So I think that should be the vision if I'm JJ is look, you don't have to do everything on the ball. We have LeBron, and more kind of specifically, in my opinion, we have Austin who can at least shoulder some of that load with you. Not necessarily like do it for you, but share some of it with you and give yourself some of a break, because the times that the Kyrie and Luka pairing did work a lot, it was when you were able to put those two guys in the paired slots and, okay, attack the middle gap and defense collapse. And now it's Kyrie. Now it's Luka being able to attack a shifting defense. That's how I think the pairing of Luka and Austin works offensively, and why it's not that overly complicated to me when people, and I get most of the times it's defensively, but there are people I think that question, can Luka fit next to, one of these two or both of them? It's fairly simple. Pair them both in the slots, attack the gaps. I think Bron is the one where it's maybe a little bit more interesting, because I think Bron's touches shouldn't really be as much perimeter focused anymore, in my opinion, at least. And that's a potentially whole separate conversation. But I think Bron's touches should be more catch and shoot, off of cuts, even some like middle of the floor pin down stuff. He was a super reliable mid range shooter last year, to where I'm at least like sprinkling it in. And then him as a screener. Honestly, I don't need to see in like the nail mid post touches. I don't need to see LeBron do spread pick and roll 10 times when I have 27-year-old Austin Reeves, or however old he is, and arguably the best standstill creator in the league from the perimeter. I don't need to see that anymore. So that is the one thing about those three as a trio, that is kind of interesting to go off what you were saying.
I completely agree with you. Remember they had that chase 77 action where they would sometimes have Luka coming off a couple of pin downs, typically on, I guess if you're facing the basket, the right side of the floor, but depending on where you are, either the right or left side. But I thought they had a lot of success with that. I thought they had success with sometimes it would be like Luka on one side of the floor and then some sort of two-man action on the weak side with Austin and LeBron, or maybe LeBron has the ball, and leveraging Austin having typically a mismatch in terms of that player defending Luka or LeBron. So if you could get a smaller guard switched onto one of those guys, they could post up. So I would like to see more post ups. I do agree with you that Luka's decision making out of post ups or even off ball stuff can sometimes be like he's so good at scanning the floor and court mapping that I think can sometimes want to take that second or take that beat to reevaluate things. Whereas because he's not that quick twitch explosive athlete the way that a prime LeBron or like an Ant is, I think he wants to take that extra second, and that can sometimes affect the way something opens up. But I think that they just have to become a little less predictable, and it felt like at times last year, especially looking at their shot profile, like it became very much more similar to Dallas, and they clearly, or how Dallas was in the Luka era later on, and they shifted things way more in Luka's direction, which makes sense because he's their best player, he's the franchise player, and they needed to adjust things on the fly, and maybe honestly just simplify things of like we're gonna run these basic things and we'll have some intricate sets, but like we know our bread and butter is going to be Luka high pick and roll, and sometimes maybe it's pick and pop with LeBron or Rui as the screener, but like I felt like they just oversimplified things at times too much, and they became too predictable. And one of the big things that I'm interested in with Luka and this whole transformation physically is like his ability to beat bigs off the dribble and get into the paint. And we saw that at Eurobasket. But just thinking back on the Minnesota series, like they were comfortable switching Rudy Gobert and Naz Reid and Julius Randle onto Luka and Austin and LeBron and living with the results and saying like, we dare you to beat these guys off the dribble. And more often than not, you're probably going to settle for some sort of contested jumper, which is exactly what happened in that series. And the Lakers didn't make those jumpers at a high enough rate. So I think that's another wrinkle within this of, JJ talked about Austin being in better shape and being stronger and better conditioned. LeBron, we know how well he takes care of his body. Then Luka with this transformation, like maybe those guys can beat guys off the dribble a little bit better than they were able to last year, because I still think they need that north-south component more.
And this is, I think there was something you said that perfectly like introduces DeAndre into the conversation, and we don't have to talk about him too much. But this is where I think DeAndre Ayton becomes super underrated and important for this Lakers team, because what you just brought up is why I think one of our biggest things that we brought up, going into the playoffs last year, and why I think we kind of slept on Minnesota, because I don't think anybody expected them to switch or play like coverage-wise how they did.
I mean, JJ said after game one that it threw off their entire offensive game plan because they did not expect Minnesota to switch that much. So the Lakers didn't even expect that. Yeah,
so the Lakers didn't expect it. And the reason why it worked because of the fact that the Lakers did not have a big post-AD trade that could punish. It was funny. So pre-AD Luka trade, they were god-awful against drop and some two on the ball scenarios, but they were amazing against switching because you couldn't switch. It's AD, and AD's just going to eat that matchup. And I'm not saying Aiden is Anthony Davis offensively. No, Anthony Davis is still like 20 and 10, 25 and 10 or whatever. But DeAndre at the very least can punish a switch or at least attack out of the short roll mid, like elbow to post area. Where Jaxson Hayes is just switch, get underneath him, and you eliminate the one thing he can do, which is catch lobs, and is just completely nullified. And that's kind of what happened in that Timberwolves series, and in some other series too. I think it would have happened as well, which is why we were a little bit more concerned about some other matchups for the Lakers, where Aiden comes in, and okay, I get it, he does have some baggage that comes with him in terms of how his previous stops have kind of ended specifically. I think specifically what left a sour taste in people's mouths is how Phoenix ended, because Monty gets fired, and I feel like everybody sided with Aiden in that whole thing. At least like media or like publicly, or maybe I'm just on NBA Twitter too much. But that's at least how I kind of remember it.
Yeah.
Where, or maybe not even sided with Aiden, but it was kind of like, okay, cool. At least both you guys are both at fault, and we're at least going to give Aiden another chance because he's still here. And then Phoenix goes how it goes, and he goes to Portland. That's not a winning situation. We just kind of like left him at where we left him at after Phoenix. Where in reality, and this is not even a shot at Jaxson Hayes, DeAndre Aiden is just miles better of an offensive player than Jaxson Hayes is. So
100%, yeah.
DeAndre, it's not close. DeAndre at his floor, at his baseline, as most frustrating of a player, is still more impactful on the offensive end of the floor than anybody they've had of the entire LeBron era, not named Anthony Davis offensively. So now it just makes them tougher to guard coverage-wise, because if you blitz, Luka and Bron can make every single pass. Austin made a significant playmaking leap last season, in my opinion, at least. You're not going to play drop because that's pull-up three-point heaven for Luka and Austin. And then now if you switch, I wonder how much better Luka is at like attacking those switches this season downhill with being more in shape. Austin not having the toe injury that we saw cause Darius Garland to miss 4 playoff games and then come back and still be kind of a shell of himself. Not having to deal with that. And then, okay, cool, you switch and we can't win from the perimeter. You have, by a miracle, you somehow stop that. We still have 7-foot DeAndre Aiden who can legitimately attack switches. That's why I don't think you have to I don't understand why we're overthinking the Aiden thing offensively, at least. Because I think he's just a really
who's
good
overthinking
fit.
It? Are people overthinking it?
Maybe not overthinking it, but like, okay, not overthinking it, being overly negative. I think there are just like negative tones about the Aiden thing where I'm like, dog, he's good. And
he's good.
The price tag,
especially offensively.
Better.
Like that's where I think he's going to be in that like 15 to 17 point range pretty easily. Yeah. And that's valuable. Like I think he's going to usurp Rui as the number 4 option, and maybe even some nights usurp Austin as the number 3 option if he gets it going. I think my questions with him are more so on the defensive end and just his ability to prop up what I think is going to be at times a problematic defense or a limited defense. But we'll see what JJ can cook up with the ingredients he currently has. Let's get into the training camp battles here. So you teased before the show that you were asking me about the 5th starter, and we started to get into it. We're like, all right, let's save it for the pod. So I've been very vocal. I think the starting lineup should be DeAndre Ayton, LeBron James, Luka Doncic, Austin Reeves, and Marcus Smart. I think it makes the most sense. It balances out. Like Ayton clearly, I think Ayton, LeBron, and Luka are the clear starting locks. I would argue Austin is a clear starting lock. He's their third best player, contract year. They view him as a long-term piece, but I know he's the guy that a lot of people want to come off the bench. So in talking through the exercise, I've often put him to the side as like not a lock, but I do believe that Austin is going to be starting on opening night and for the full season. But when looking at what the Lakers need, I think they need perimeter defense out there, particularly in the backcourt. And if you go with any other combination of Rui and Smart, Rui and Vando and Smart, I think you just run into some issues. Like Vando and Smart is interesting, but I just don't think JJ trusts Vando enough to be a starter. Vando averaged 14 minutes a game in the full strength games post Luka trade. He was a 2-shift player, and then he only played over 20 minutes last year 6 times out of 36 games. In all 6 of those games, they were down at least one front court starter. So I know a lot of people want Vando to start. I'm just telling you, JJ loves spacing and he loves shooting, and Vando is a glaring red negative in both regards. So I don't see Vando jumping up over Jake LaRavia and Rui and Marcus Smart and like being this starting piece that some people want him to be. So I think it really comes down to Rui versus Marcus for the 5th spot. I think just because of the defensive end and Marcus's ability to defend multiple positions and particularly defend backcourt guys, I lean Marcus. But what's your perspective on the 5th starter? And do you think this is something that should be decided right now, or should there be somewhat of a camp battle? And it's just like, hey, maybe Marcus Smart is cooked. He hasn't looked the same the last couple of years. And if Rui is like that much better overall or that much more productive, maybe he should remain the starter and the Lakers just lean into the offensive end and say, we're going to try to outscore you every night.
To hell with defense at this point. I mean, that was the play last year. We saw that.
Yeah. Well, the offense wasn't good enough last year either, so that's the other part of this.
I guess that was the real
your
problem.
offense has to at least be good,
right? No. So, what I was going to say before you cut me off, or you told me to save it rather, what we were talking like off air, I guess, or off camera, was that I agree with you. I'm very much start Marcus Smart. And I guess there's something to like, let's see what Marcus Smart looks like, at least in camp and on court in preseason even. Like there's something to just holding on to it and not saying anything, which I respect. So I'm very much start Marcus Smart. I think, honestly, defensively, it just perfectly allocates roles a lot easier than it does if you start Rui. Now, with that being said, and this was the second part of what I was going to say, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Rui's a starter for kind of everything I said earlier. It just wouldn't. It would every time. I feel like every time in previous years, and maybe you could argue that the Lakers haven't had it as good of an option to replace Rui until now. My count of that would be, I mean, God, we were banging the table for Dorian Finney-Smith last season when he got here to replace Rui, and it didn't happen. But you could argue that Marcus Smart might be a better option, and that's cool. But I just think that every time we've had a scenario like this, and I guess it's only been 2, maybe 3 seasons now that we've been put in this scenario. They've just consistently showed us, yeah, we're gonna go with Rui. We're gonna go with Rui. We're gonna go with Rui here.
Well. There was a time when they started Taurean Prince, Jared Vanderbilt, and Cam Reddish.
Do we have to talk about that period?
I don't know if you Men in Black that from your memory, but that did happen for 2 games.
Yeah, no, because remember I can't even say the thing I want to say. I can't think of it. They rage bait.
We can move on. I could hear people just throwing their phones.
We forgot about that game
right now.
Forgot about it because they won. They beat OKC, I think, didn't they?
So they technically played 3. I think one of the games. So they played 3 games with the guardless lineup. I think they beat Charlotte, and they got down 12-0 to Boston, and it was like Boston just whooped the ass of that lineup. They couldn't score, and then I think Rui started in place of one of the guys. Someone was out, maybe Vando, and Rui started. So it was like the same spirit of the lineup, and they won in OKC. So they went technically 2-1, but like from a process standpoint, they were bringing their 3rd, 4th, and 5th best players and 3rd, 4th, and 5th highest paid players, off the bench, and it was just like, what's going on here? Like this, I remember like I've rarely written columns like ripping a coach I ripped Darvin after that decision, and it was just like, I don't see this at all. That's an aside. But to your point, they do love Rui. They do love Rui. So I don't think I've said this publicly yet. Like, I do think if we're handicapping like the percentage of who starts, I would lean 55% Rui, 45% Marcus. I still am leaning, and maybe it ends up being like last year where they stick with the same starting lineup functionally with the D'Lo, Rui, Austin one last year, and then early in the season they went to Cam, and then eventually they went to Max. And I think that was JJ's like hope, was that Max would play his way into the starting group. I could see maybe it being like a situation where Marcus has to play his way into the starting group. But I also wonder if like maybe they extend Rui and then they're like, hey, buddy, we just paid you, but like now you got to come off the bench. Like that, I guess could also be an option here.
Yeah, it's possible. But just to go back to Marcus, I think, like I said, it just puts everybody in a more comfortable position defensively where I think they can kind of handle what they need to, and it's not overbearing or it's too much or you're just asking them to do too much. I think Austin, when you're asking Austin to check the second best backcourt guard or the secondary, primary ball handler, I think he's actually like perfectly solid. Where you start to see Austin lack on honestly either end of the floor. Or both, is when you're asking him to check the best player. Because then we've seen series in the past where, okay, he has to do that, and now his offensive game is dragging because it's taxing on his legs defensively, and he is giving, he's going to give maximum effort. I think Austin has a really good motor and does compete at a high level. And for the most part, I think he's a pretty, solid to, dare I say, underrated, like one-on-one defender. He's going to take his losses.
I believe in B-Ball Index, he graded out as a B+ perimeter isolation defender, which at his position is obviously a really good mark.
Yeah, like I think he's pretty solid. But now you go from him having to do that to maybe him more as, if we're going with B-Ball Index terms, like as a chaser or still maybe checking your secondary option, but just lowering his matchup difficulty and doing some stuff like that to where you're not burning him on that end. Because now if it's Rui in the starting five and Austin's checking the ones, okay, so between Luka, Rui, and Bron, okay, now one of those two have to guard that secondary option, which is going based off what we saw last season, probably going to be Rui, which just isn't really conducive for team success, I think.
Do you remember Rui guarding Darius Garland early in the season in Cleveland? That did not go well.
I do remember that. And that's where it really scares me, is these matchups where it's multiple guards and then, God forbid, they have a wing too. I just think you are significantly like strong arming yourself. I think I used that right. And into what options you have, where at the very least, if you go Marcus Smart, I think this is actually a point Tim did bring up, is that like, dude, Marcus Smart can legitimately guard up too. And like all the matchup data in the past also like points to like his ability to be able to guard up. It just gives you more options. And then if it's a night where you have the best players a wing, Boston, Jaylen Brown. Okay, Marcus, go check Jaylen Brown. Austin, go get Pam Pritchard / Anthony Simons. And I feel fine about that, as opposed to Rui, you got Jalen, Aussie, you got Peyton, and okay, cool, they still have Anthony Simons or Derek White. I didn't even say Derek White. And it's now Luka or Bron. So I just think you have more options by going Marcus Smart personally. But again, wouldn't be surprised. Not even going to react if it's Rui Hachimura on opening night, because that's honestly what I expect. But I think Marcus does make more sense.
We're in agreement. I think, again, like it people, because I posted, I did an episode on a starting lineup breakdown in making my case. And then I just did a social video yesterday that's gotten a lot of engagement, and some of the, it's a lot of offense focused things of like Austin needs the ball in his hands and Rui plays better off of the ball, and he's a good catch and shoot guy. And I'm like, that's all great. Like if we were playing, if this was half court basketball and we're playing, or the Lakers are only playing one side of the floor and this is football, like sure, that like you can make a case. I would start Rui over Marcus. Then yeah, like if we're only talking about offense, but when we talk about defense and the roles, and like I also think that the other thing I think the notion of Austin coming off the bench is just absolutely ludicrous. But if this team had a Danny Green, KCP, Herb Jones, Jalen Suggs type on it, you could potentially sell me on a vision of Austin shifting to like a Ginobili type 6-man role. But I don't think this team has, like, Marcus Smart is not that type of player anymore. Rui's not that type of player. Vando's not that type of player. I don't think Jake LaRavia is that type of player. I don't think they have that like perimeter two-way stud that should displace Austin. If they had that guy, then maybe that's a different conversation. But if you're moving him to the bench, you're reducing his minutes. Because that's the other part of this is like there's like if Austin's starting, he's playing 34 to 36 minutes. If he's coming off the bench, it's hard to get him past 28 or maybe 30 minutes. Like you're not just moving him to the bench, you are reducing his overall role. You're reducing his usage. And I just, I think I don't think they have the talent, to be completely frank, to offset that and to get past that. But I think we're in agreement with the fifth starter. What about the backup center spot? This has been something that, like, there were times last year, Jaxson Hayes for a 6-week stretch looked like a potential starting center and played the best basketball of his career. Maxi Kleber is a guy who clearly JJ Redick trusts, throwing him in the fire in Game 5. Lakers season
over
on the
the
line.
perfectly healthy Jaxson Hayes.
He's playing crunch time, but he's got the Luka connection. He's been multiple deep playoff runs with Luka, one of Luka's better friends in the league. He's apparently looked really good in workouts and is in great shape. So I also think we could throw in Adou Thiero into this as a small ball 5 option who can defend multiple positions and is a really good cutter and roller and finisher on the basket. So with those 3 guys, I would put Thiero as like a distant third, but at least worth a mention here. How do you see the backup center battle shaking out?
For me, I think it's Jaxson Hayes, then it's Kleber, and then if you want to have the fun experiment with Thiero, then he would be third.
There we go.
And for me with Kleber, I'm just very much wait and see. I don't think we've seen anything over the past 12 to 16 months like suggest that Maxi Kleber is a effective basketball player still. And mind you, 3 years ago, I was all in. Hell yeah, I was begging. I knew Dallas wasn't going to trade him, but God, I was like, yes, please go get Maxi Kleber. It makes perfect sense. If you somehow can get 2021 Maxi Kleber back in out of nowhere, or 2022 Maxi Kleber back, then I think that would probably be the backup 5, or at the very least, you can just do more creative things lineup wise in terms of how you're structuring your lineup and how you're doing certain things. But until, at least for me, now I'm just going to take their word for it and say that, Maxi looks great in camp until the first preseason game happens and we get to make our own evaluations. But until further notice, I'm going to lean Jaxson Hayes, although I think the first chance JJ gets to be like, see, I told you guys, Maxi's been getting better. First chance he gets. First chance he gets.
So I think Jaxson is probably the player I have more confidence in at like a baseline level of just what his floor is. But I think if we're giving JJ truth serum and asking him about this, I think his ideal version of this team is Maxi Kleber being a stretch 5 who could be part of switchy lineups, and they could play these like pseudo small lineups that you can switch everything, and maybe you're getting funky with it.
He wants Maxi to be his Al Horford.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm interested to see how that battle goes, and both guys have relationships for what it's worth. Both guys have relationships with Luka. Jaxson shares the same agent as Luka. Maxi has been one of Luka's longest tenured teammates. So we'll see how that battle goes. I guess if we think about the bench group, right? So if we go with, let's say they do the shrewd thing and start Marcus Smart, and you have Rui coming off the bench, looking at some of the other bench pieces, it's like you got Gabe, you got Vando, you got Jake LaRavia. So you do have some shooting out there with Gabe, Rui, and LaRavia. So you can build out some lineups where
Gabe's
maybe Jaxson. I mean, he does take shots. He does take shots.
He's shooter adjacent.
I didn't say he's a good. I didn't say he's a good shooter. I said he's a shooter.
All right, my bad.
So you got some spacing in theory where like you could build out some second unit groupings of Luka or Austin as the primary ball handler. Then you have Gabe as like Gabe, Jake, and Rui as like spot up catch and shoot guys around that. And then you have a pick and roll with Jaxson or a pick and pop with Maxi. So I think you have some optionality there. It might just be more of a matchup based thing depending on the team. Like, to be completely frank, I still think the two biggest concerns for me with this roster are like, I think they're one perimeter defender short, and specifically like a guy who can be at least like a neutral offensively, if not ideally a positive offensively, while being a clear positive defensively. And then I think the backup center spot, like you just compare it to the rest of the contenders, and most teams have, I think, substantially better backup options. So, I have the Lakers ahead of the Clippers right now, but the Clippers have Brook Lopez coming off the bench. The Lakers have Jaxson Hayes and Maxi Kleber. Like, it's just for all of Lopez's maybe limitations in the playoffs now with some of the defensive stuff, like he's just a night and day better player than either one of those guys. So you just go down up and down like rosters, and like OKC can stagger Chet and Hartenstein, right? And like Minnesota has Naz Reid coming off the bench. It's just like those teams have much better options.
Now, mind you, we're saying this about and talking about the Lakers' backup situation being a problem compared to the other the other contenders in the league, and specifically in the West. Well, these two guys were the guys Lakers were counting on to play starting caliber minutes or crunch time minutes last year. So there is Jovan really giving us optimism by talking about how bad the Lakers' backup big situation is. But in reality, he's just making us feel grateful.
That's a good point. It's a good point.
he's making sure we're grateful for what we didn't have last year.
I mean, the center spot's in such a better, like having Ayton for 30 to 32, 34 minutes a night, like they're in such a better spot overall. And really, I think worst case scenario, you could just go back to playing some small ball. Like you could split the remaining 16, 18 minutes between half small ball looks and half of Kleber or Jaxson. Like, I don't think either guy should really be more than a 10 to 12 minute a night guy. Like, I think that's kind of pushing it, to be completely honest.
And one other thing really quick to go back and kind of tie a bow on the backup big thing. I think the bigger problem is with Kleber and Hayes is that neither one of them are like overwhelmingly impressive rebounders. Like if you go back to,
I would argue both are below average rebounders.
Yeah, so if you go back to Kleber's last fully healthy season, which would be 2020, or like semi-healthy season for Kleber, 2024, graded out as a D adjusted offensive rebounding success rate, C plus offensive rebounding talent, C minus adjusted defensive rebounding success rate, D plus defensive rebounding talent. Where Jaxson Hayes, this year was C plus in the same categories. I'm going in order, not so I don't have to repeat it, but C plus in both an offensive rebounding success rate, C plus in defensive rebounding talent, and D in offensive rebounding talent, and D plus in defensive rebounding success rate. So they're just both bad rebounders. And then Hayes has all his other issues. And Kleber, if he isn't able to move or knock down shots, like that's why I'm like, JJ is just waiting for the he's hitting shots, guys. We have our stretch five.
I mean, I don't like that. I guess I lean more Hayes, I guess, in theory, but then I also go back to, I don't think Jaxson is a playoff big, and Maxi, at least we've seen it with him. If he can find a way to move and to kind of, well, like to get back to being who he was. Like, I don't think he's ever going to be who he was like a few years ago, but like if he can get back to being who he was a couple years ago, I think we're still probably talking about guys who are both best at like third string as being third string centers. Jaxson, I think has some utility in the regular season. I just think we saw how Minnesota took him out of that series and he was completely ineffective on both sides of the ball. And like, I just don't see that changing in like a playoff setting, or even as like a bench player. So I think Jaxson, I'm pessimistic, like long-term in terms of his viability and like as a playoff guy. Maxi, I have like a little kernel of hope if he could stay healthy all season. But ideally, I think if I'm the Lakers, I trade for that perimeter guy and a better backup. I don't know what that's going to cost, and I don't know the outgoing person, but that's my perspective on that. What about the seventh man? Because I think we're in agreement that there's a clear top six, and they have six starting level guys, whether it's Rui or Marcus coming off the bench. But for that seventh spot, I also view it as like the second defender spot, because I think the three primary guys for the seventh spot are Vando, Gabe, and Jake LaRavia. And just by nature of the rotation, like whoever is seventh is technically going to, it's going to be playing the most and like have a certain level of defensive responsibility as the seventh guy. And in my opinion, probably the second best defensive guy behind Marcus Smart. So this could go in a variety of ways. I think based on some of the comments today, like it sounds like Jake LaRavia has a couple of big fans in the building in Rob Pelinka and JJ, but also we saw Gabe Vincent, like JJ could not quit Gabe Vincent, and he was the one guy he was considering subbing in the second half of game 4. So I kind of actually think Vando is more the odd man out here in terms of being closer to the ninth man than the seventh man. But how do you view the seventh man competition and the importance of it? Because I do think, again, this is going to be like the second most important defender in the rotation, just in terms of like their perimeter responsibility.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting point you bring up, specifically with Gabe and how he won't quit Gabe Vincent. He won't quit the Gabe Vincent experience. And I also think like part of this, in theory, I think Gabe is a guy that I think every coach would want to have on their team, because Gabe
JJ said he wants 10 Gabe Vincents. He loved 10 Gabe Vincents, right?
Yeah.
That was I believe he said that.
Can at least half of them be able to shoot, please? Like,
you need 10 2023 Gabe Vincents.
There we go.
There you go.
And speaking of that, like you brought up Gabe, like that's the version of Gabe that I just don't think you're ever going to get again. That very clearly just feels like a flash in the pan, because that version of Gabe is like, heck yeah, dude, impacting the game on both ends of the floor with the shooting, the connected playmaking, the defensive intelligence and awareness, and just not all the things I mentioned, but a good chunk of those things have just been gone since that season. Specifically, I feel like there's been a pretty decent playmaking like step back too. Granted, the Lakers don't ask him to do nearly as much as what he was required to do in Miami, but that and just obviously the shot, and that was just clearly a special run for everybody on that Heat team. However, outside of that, and well, actually, one last point about Gabe, I do wonder if it's a little bit trickier depending on who starts. Like, if Marcus is starting, then I'm kind of, okay, cool. I feel it's maybe easier because Marcus is now a Rui spot, and it's, Marcus is now a Rui starting spot, and you have two wings to come off the bench in theory. Whereas if it's Rui starting, now there's two guards to come off the bench, and it just kind feels like
he eats into Gabe's role a little bit.
Yeah, right. Or and vice versa.
Yeah,
not even vice versa. I think Jake is going to have a way to play almost regardless. It's just going to be like where those minutes kind of fall in at. Because I know we talk about this every year, but I really do hope regular season we like really load manage Braun offensively.
We'll see. Yeah.
We'll see, but this is the first full season where the Lakers have had a elite ball handler on the same team as him. I know they viewed Austin really, really highly heading into last year, and they wanted to play through AD a lot more heading into last season, but you still need somebody to get AD the ball. And
I was thinking about Russ. That's
oh man, you were just pulling out all the.
I'm just pulling out all the receipts,
all the PTSD.
On the show.
Flashbacks. Good God. Man. This dude wants to have nightmares on the pod.
Listen, I've been podcasting for like almost 3 hours today, so I'm a little loopy at this point, but continue, please.
He's relapsing.
Yeah.
So I do kind of wonder like how they potentially answer each other.
We're talking about load managing LeBron. Yeah.
Yeah. And therefore I think Jake's just going to have minutes regardless. And kind of not necessarily for that reason. I do just kind of think Jake's maybe better as a player at this point. Maybe I'm a little lower on Gabe Vincent entering 2025, 26. And maybe it's because I'm, steering the car too back to the left because that was, particularly high on the Gabe signing, and it's kind of burned me for the past 2 years. One, because of health, and two, because of poor play, specifically in the playoffs. Didn't shoot the ball well at all, and just at times it's just too small. Where Jake might be the shiny new thing. Grades out well metrically to, in terms of like some of the isolation stuff defensively, plays the passing lanes well. I think I'm a little worried because there is a chance that some of LaRavia's flaws, or if it doesn't go well, if it doesn't look well for LaRavia, I think it could look like even worse than what it actually is because the Lakers' defensive talent on the roster just isn't that good. Unless you get 2021 DeAndre Ayton back, which legitimately was a like really, really good defender. Just look at everybody where they're at currently. It's like this roster isn't that good defensively, and it could put a situation where LaRavia isn't bad, and it just makes it even worse than what it actually is.
I like that point. I think we view it in similar ways. Like I think ideally Jake is the seventh guy. I did a 25-30 minute film breakdown. I watched hours of film from him from last season with Memphis and Sacramento, and like I just think he's straight up better than Gabe Vincent and Jared Vanderbilt, and just he's a jack of all trades who could do a little bit of everything. He can handle the ball, he can pass, he can shoot. Shot really well last year. Granted, it was a low volume, but like I think is clearly a better shooter than both Gabe and Vando, and that is something that this team needs and something that JJ really values. But to me, he's like a connecting piece on offense who will just grease the wheels, make the extra pass, make smart reads, and then also keep the defense honest with his gravity and his ability to space the floor. And then defensively, I think he's one of the more versatile defenders on this roster. Like I'm not going to say he's on that smart Vando level because I think those are clearly the two best defenders on the roster. But I think Jake is much better than people think. And I don't know if it's because he's a white guy who apparently looks like me. That's the comparison people like to make. And like, because of that they think he can't defend. But like, I don't see it, but like, I think he could really defend. And so I think it should ideally be Jake. To your point, the Lakers it might be a situation where they ask too much of him defensively, and it's like whoever is that seventh guy needs to play an important defensive role, and maybe they're kind of setting him up. I don't want to say to fail, but not to succeed necessarily by being like, go lock down guys for 20, 25 minutes. Like we'll see if he can do that in like a contending situation. So I would say I think Jake is the best of the three, and to me also, he might be the Lakers' best two-way player, which kind of sounds crazy, but like if we're just judging on like pure like who's providing like value on both sides of the ball, I think he's in the conversation for like everyone else. Like Marcus Smart, I have real offensive questions with the shot selection and the pull-up threes and like the turnovers he's regressed in. Vando, we know about his long limitations offensively, so. And then Gabe is inefficient and a bit of a chucker. So like you go down the list and it's like there aren't many positive defenders on this team. And then most of them have some pretty clear offensive flaws. So Jake might be the one guy who can be like a net positive on both sides of the ball. And I think that's pretty valuable. With all this said, I think the Lakers ceiling, like if Vando can get back to being who he was in 2023, that is a huge swing factor. That is an X factor for this group that like, if he can play with more confidence offensively and be more effective as a finisher, and then also be healthy and athletic and spry and be able to defend and just be that maniac and that menace on the floor defensively that he has been in the past, that's a guy who could earn that seventh spot and could, I think, change the dynamic of this team. But I just don't think he's been that guy the last couple of years. And we've seen it in spurts, we've seen it in flashes, but not consistently. And then you couple that with the offensive limitations, and it's like, I just think that's a pretty problematic player for a team with contention aspirations. So now when I say aspiration, I immediately think of the whole tampering cap circumvention situation. I think of trees.
I thought you were going down another like Laker PTSD rabbit hole. No.
I was thinking of all the trees that were planted, the millions and millions of trees. But what do you think of like
million trees, right? If like each tree was $1, about 48 million of them.
Where did the other 2 million go? We'll never know. But what do you think of like Vando as like kind of the wild card here? Because he's a guy who I think if he plays like he did in 2023, that's a very useful player who could play his way into a larger role. If he plays the way he did the last couple of years, I think he's a 2-shift player who's probably more the ninth man.
I think the problem with Vando offensively, and maybe at first I also felt victim of blaming it on the shooting, but over the past couple of years, I really feel like the biggest problem with Vando is he is such a negative athlete at the rim. For somebody who like has all the other athletic traits, he's such a negative athlete and just negative finisher at the rim. To where like, and that's why I'm not all that worried about Adou Thiero, for example, long term, because he's the opposite. He is an explosive, dynamic athlete at the rim. To where I honestly think you can scheme around. If you're a good coach, you should be able to scheme around having non shooters on your team. You should be able to, right? There's just too many creative ways to deal with that. And specifically when Vando first got here, the biggest thing that got said a lot was, okay, turn Vando to a screener. Well, eventually, okay, it worked. Eventually it's going to be, okay, cool, Vando can screen all he wants. We're still going to sag off and he has to make a play at the rim or dribble or do something productive. The screen, there's just ways to nullify that. And if you can't consistently finish off of 2 feet or just finish athletically, sometimes through contact to the rim, then it just nullifies any offensive impact the screening can even have. So I think what you were saying is really the more important thing. I could at this point care less if he's a 35% left corner 3-point shooter. Like, can you be spry and athletic at the rim? Not saying like the shooting wouldn't be a tremendous plus at this point in year 6 in his career that you get a year 6 shooting development. Not saying
I'm checking. Pretty sure it might be year longer? 7. Yeah, it's 2019 or 2018 draft.
So this is 7 if he's 18.
Yeah, no, he's played 7 years. This is year 8 for Vando.
Oh dang. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 6,
I like
7,
how we're a couple of analytics guys who are struggling to count years.
Count years. Where's B? But like, I mean, it'd be fantastic to get a
he's played 7 years. So
yeah, it'd be fantastic if we got a shooting development, year 8 into a professional NBA career. But I just don't think that's likely at this point. But for crying out loud, can be an effective finisher at the rim because then it just opens up so much. Remember, another take about Vando at the beginning was put him in a dunker spot. You can't because he's not a dynamic enough of a finisher at the rim to where it's meaningful.
It's been trending down for 5 straight years, and that's my concern with him. Is like it feels like he's. And I know he's had the injuries the last couple of years, but if you actually just look at the totality of his basketball career, he's been somewhat injury riddled and dealt with several lower extremity things. So this has been a trend with him. And the fact that it almost felt like at times last year he started to get in his head a little bit about, I don't want to blow this layup. I'm going to pass it up. And just like it was not trending in the right direction where I think I've kind of just accepted like, the limitations are what they're going to be with the shooting. I think that does limit the lineups he could play in. That does limit how much he could play overall. That is why I view him as more of a bench guy, and I think the coaching staff views him as more of a bench guy. But the difference between him being like a 12-minute or 14-minute a night guy and like a 20 or 22-minute a night guy is going to be the finishing and going to be the athleticism and impact defensively. And like, I think I also think like he's kind of benefited from like the rest of the group being so bad defensively that when he comes in, he just looks so much better because he is. But I don't think he's defended at the level he did 2 years ago, and that's partly just been an accumulation, of injuries and just lower body limitations. And we'll see. This is his first healthy offseason in a couple of years, and maybe he's coming in tip-top shape and back to being who he was earlier in his career. But I don't think we've really seen that guy other than a few flashes, over the last 2 years.
And not to like harp on it even more, but over the past 5 years of his career where he has been getting heavy play time, the first 2 years he just didn't play a ton at all. He averaged 4 minutes a game in 17 games in his rookie year, and then he averaged 4 minutes in a combined 11 games with Minnesota and Denver his second year. So the past 5 years for Vando, since he's been playing meaningful minutes, if you're just looking at his finishing talent, That last season was his second worst season of his entire career as a finisher, behind his first year as a Laker and his second year as a Laker. If you want to look at contact finish rate, whatever, only 14%, I believe that is, which is dead last for his entire career. And then, not that it's super, super important, but even if you want to look at, or this is not as much the same argument as we talk about like the athleticism, because it's defense and you're more talking maybe lateral agility and things like that, and athleticism. But last season was, even though it was his second best season, if you're looking at like perimeter isolation grade and things like that, if you're looking purely like B-Ball Index's values and how they kind of operate that, it's a significant step back from the season prior where he got hurt in Boston. Which what's unfortunate about that season is right when he got hurt was like,
it was starting to click.
He just got back.
And it was starting to click offensively. Remember, he had that stretch of like, I want to say it might have been like 8 double-digit scoring games in like 8. It was like 8 in 14 or something like that, if I'm not misremembering it. He was like finally starting to put it all together offensively, or like they were finally starting to figure out how to and
maybe there's a correlation. That was his best season.
7 of his final 9 games before he got injured, he scored in double figures. So they were finally using him, remember, on like the elbows as a cutter, and like he was finishing well at that point. But that is more of like an aberration compared to the way his game's been trending the last few years.
His second best finishing season in terms of like I guess efficiency or analytically over the past 5 seasons, and it's his best contact finishing rate over the past 5 seasons by a pretty comfortable margin. So I think we're kind of on the same page with Vando too. I'm not even asking for 2023, I guess, like that playoff stretch from Vando. I'm not even asking for that. Like, can we like get somewhere close back to where you were in 24? Like after getting back healthy, you finally get a full off season. I feel like Vando has just been marred with injuries over these past, really throughout his entire career. You get a full off season. You get a full off season with JJ being able to be in the gym, and JJ gets to see how he wants to utilize you on both ends of the floor. Can you get back to really impacting the game? Because if you are this 2-stint player, then honestly, and maybe this doesn't get a lot of coverage, his contract is just god awful. Then if he's a 2-stint player, it's a really, really bad contract, because you legitimately need those minutes to be allocated, that salary to equal minutes that are longer than 2 5-minute stints.
Well, and looking at, it's not like between him, Gabe, and Maxi, that's
30
almost
million?
34. No, it's like 34, almost 35 million across those 3. And that's problematic. Like I think, I don't know. I don't want to speculate on like what they would get on the open market right now, but I think all 3 of those guys would. All right, that's meaner than what I was going to say. So now, like I think they're all kind of minimum. You know, maybe Vando, just because he is such a unique player with in his defensive talent, is like when he's locked in, he's an all defense, locked in and healthy. He's an all defense caliber guy. Like maybe a taxpayer MLE guy, but I don't think either one of those guys is sniffing anywhere close to their current contracts, which. With Maxi and Gabe, at least you're expiring. With Vando, you got 3 more years left. So that's what makes that one pretty difficult to deal. But anything else before we wrap here?
No.
I guess the 10th man one, 10th man one, I think there's a clear top 9. Like we kind of highlighted like the top 6 and then the 3 guys in competition for the 7th spot. The 10th and 11th spots, I guess, is whoever wins the backup center spot, and then like Dalton. But it really depends. Do they want to go 10? Do they want to go 11? Maybe they get really funky and go like Dalton and Thiero and just say like the backup center spot is a mess for like the 6th straight year, 5th straight year. And we're just going to go centerless again. But yeah, I mean, I guess how Dalton, the fact that we didn't mention Dalton for the first almost 70 minutes of the show kind of speaks to where I think he's at in the pecking order. But there's an outside chance, I guess, he's in that top 8 or 9. I just think LaRavia is kind of on his turf as the efficient shooter who can also you're a better rebounder, better defender, better playmaker, ball handler. Like I think outside of just pure scoring, LaRavia has an edge over Dalton.
Yeah,
and even then, who knows?
I think JJ doesn't want to have his hair get gray too soon over Dalton not remembering the plays.
Yeah,
that are for Dalton.
Yes. Well, Sean, this was long overdue. It had been several months, and I'm glad that we finally made this happen. Where can the good people watching and listening find you? Los Angeles Lakers Network and Sports Headliners? That was correct?
Yep.
Awesome. I will link both of them below, but appreciate you taking the time and appreciate you all watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. On the road to 30K subscribers before the season starts. And we are just there. We are under 30 subscribers remaining until 30K. So would appreciate you all if you hit that subscribe button. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back next week. I'll talk to you then.